Everybody, welcome back to the fourth and final installment of our feature film, Saving Private Ryan. I hope you've been liking this film as much as I like it. It's definitely, as I've said many times, on my short list of all-time favorite movies, if not my favorite one. And I think even though I like the whole movie, the whole story arc, the opening scene and then the final scene that you're about to see are definitely my favorite parts. And if I had to pick one of the two, I think this closing scene is actually my favorite part of the movie. Now, it's a pretty good story, even though it's fictionalized. And I've gotten into that. We talked about some of the ethical dilemmas that have played out in the film up to this point, and had some Q&A questions and journal entries that tie into it. The opening scene, though, really accurately covers what it looked like when the Allied soldiers were storming the beaches at the D-Day invasion. This final scene you're about to see, I think, does a great job showing what the fighting looked like after we pushed out of the beaches. Okay, now this is one fictionalized account as they're defending a bridge in the town of Rommel. All right, so again, it's kind of fictionalized, but this is the type of fighting, the kind of combat that our soldiers were seeing in the weeks and months following the D-Day invasion. So it should give you some pretty good imagery in your head and help this kind of make sense. Now, where we left off yesterday, they had finally tracked down James Francis Ryan from Iowa, the fourth and the only surviving member of the Ryan family, or the Ryan brothers. So they found him, and their mission was to extract him out of the combat situation, get him back to safety, and he'll be transferred to non-combat duty. But when he gets the news of that, he you could imagine if you find out at one moment you've lost all of your siblings. That'd be quite a tragedy and would really impact you. And he says to Captain Miller and Sergeant Horvath that, hey, the only brothers I have left are these guys that I'm here fighting with right now. And our job is to do our mission. So, the captain says, what are we going to tell your mom if we leave you here? And he says, tell her I'm with the only brothers I have left. I think she'll understand that. This is something I want to emphasize, that probably none of us, including myself, have a real deep understanding of it, at least in a personal way. But soldiers that are in combat, it's a very common thing, no matter what army you're in, that soldiers start to look at the guys that are in their unit, their brothers in arms, as like true brothers, and they develop really deep bonds and a connection. So I do get, and I feel like that's probably pretty accurate to how a lot of young men would have reacted to the news that he got in the situation that he was in. So Captain Miller and then that Sergeant Horvath, they have a little discussion one-on-one, and they decide that, hey, maybe Saving Private Ryan, if we can actually pull this off and stay here and accomplish the mission that these guys are trying to fulfill, which was saving that bridge, and we can save Private Ryan at the same time, then maybe we all earn the right to go home, and we've actually accomplished something good in this war. So they end up making the decision they're going to stay there, and the whole mission that these guys, their little unit, their platoon from the 101st Airborne, this would be Private Ryan and a couple other guys that were with him, they were trying to save the bridge at the little town of Rommel. Now, that's a fictionalized bridge and town in northern France. However, there were similar missions, real life ones, that were taking place all over Normandy at this point in the war. Think about it, like the Allies have now taken all 5 of those beachheads at Normandy. This is probably about a week after the D-Day invasion. Things are very much touch and go. The Germans are planning a counterattack. They're bringing their tanks up to the front and trying to squash this invasion. That for sure is happening. It's coming. We're trying to land as many men and tanks and supplies onto the beachhead as we possibly can. And of course, the war is going to have a better outcome from our end if we're able to push deeper into France. Because if you only can control a little strip of ground on the beach, well, you're quite vulnerable, and a big enemy offensive could push you out and kind of squash the whole thing. So the deeper they can get out into Normandy and into France, the better our chances are of bringing the war to a kind of timely close and really stabbing the knife deep into Nazi Germany and ending this war. Bridges are of crucial importance, and there were, dozens of bridges in Normandy, France at this time that both sides are trying to get a hold of and capture. Because think about it, you have these old tanks. They can go over pretty rugged terrain, but one thing tanks can't cross is bodies of water. So if you have a river, or like the English Channel, remember Hitler probably would have overrun England years ago, except he couldn't get his tanks and his armored divisions across the English Channel. Well, rivers are much smaller than the English Channel, but they still provide a pretty formidable obstacle for heavy armor and tanks. So those bridges are of crucial importance because that's how you get your tanks across the river and actually get them out into combat to go fight the enemy. So from the perspective of our guys in the 101st Airborne, their mission and what their commanding officers had told them was, this is your objective. You have to hold this bridge at the town of Ramel. You hold it at all costs. Many of the bridges in northern France had already been blown up. And actually, guess who blew them up? It was us. We sent our planes in, P-51 Mustangs with bombs on them, to come in and blow up as many bridges as we could basically track down. Now, why would we do that, knowing that we're going to need the bridges a few weeks later? Well, we were worried that the Germans, in the early stages of the D-Day invasion, would get all of their tanks out there before we had many of our tanks on the beach, and it would squash the invasion. So we purposely went through, and our Air Force had blown up most of the bridges in Normandy. Only a few actually still existed at this point in the war. So their objective is, you hold that bridge because that's going to be our ticket to getting our tanks across and pushing the Germans further back. But if the Germans get there first and you're not able to fight them off, then their mission was to blow the bridge up. And that's one thing that these guys actually have quite a bit of. They're getting low on ammo and a lot of their other supplies and food, but they do have a lot of plastic explosives, which they're going to talk about that in the first part of the scene that I'm showing you today. They're kind of going over their inventory and what they have left. So think about it from their perspective. They're hoping that the American forces, the American division, will break through from the beach and show up and arrive. And if the American army gets there first, while they're sitting there waiting, hey, mission's over. You did it. You protected that bridge. Now, fresh American troops will come in and secure that location, and we'll start getting our tanks across. However, if the Germans get there first, this is what's going to happen, they have to do whatever they can to repel the Germans coming in to try to recapture the bridge. And if they can't, if they get overrun, essentially it's going to be the last guy standing. They have will blow the bridge. So they're going to have plastic explosives all rigged up to it, and kind of the Alamo point, their fallback point, if they do get overrun. And this small group of guys, Captain Miller's little unit, and these guys from the 101st Airborne, which was Private Ryan's unit, if they get overrun, they're going to blow the bridge up, because it's kind of like, if we can't hold it for our army, we'd rather it not exist at all rather than the Germans, the enemy, be able to take it. And this is a very critical point in the war where this whole D-Day operation, the invasion of Normandy, it was still kind of hanging in the balance and could have gone either way. Of course, I think at this point in the war, Germany was going to get defeated. It was a matter of time. But if the D-Day invasion gets squashed, remember, this is not something that you can just pull off an invasion like this again in another weekend or another week or a month. It would take probably about a year of planning before we'd be ready to do that again. So that's going to drag the war out potentially a whole nother year or two. So it's really critical that we hold that, because we want to wrap this war up as soon as possible, obviously. So anyway, they are hunkered down. I cut out a little scene of the movie here where they're just kind of sitting around talking, but you're not missing anything that crucial. Basically, they get supplied as best they can. They kind of get dug into the town. They set up some booby traps. You'll see them going through and planning some of that. And then they're just going to sit there and wait. And they're going to keep their fingers crossed and hope that the American reinforcements, the American troops, break through and get to them first. But as I kind of already said, which I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, the Germans are going to get there first, and they're going to have to try to fight them off. Now, I don't want to give you any more information than that right now. I want you to kick back and watch this whole scene of the movie. Like I said, this is probably my favorite part of the movie, so I hope you like it as much as I do. All right, kick back, enjoy.